Hello, my beautiful people. My name is Malzi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I talk about true crime cases that often turn into my late night rabbit holes, and I need a medium to let it out, so you are the medium today. Before we get started, I want to preface this by saying that most of the information in this video is gathered from various sources on the internet, available to anyone who wishes to click on them. In no way is this the absolute truth. This is merely my understanding of the case based on the information I have consumed. I would highly encourage everyone to do your own research. And with that long, boring speech finally coming to an end, let's get started. There's a movie called The Purge. It's a dystopian horror movie where I'm 100% sure you wouldn't want to find yourself in. The premise of the movie is simple. It's a movie where crime is legal for 12 hours straight with no availability of emergency services. You can do anything in those 12 hours, the most corrupt practices, the most evil crime, and you will not be held accountable because everything is fair and everything is game in that 12 hours. The thing that stands out to me the most is the unavailability of emergency services, like no ambulances, no hospitals, no police officers will be available to help you. Imagine that. That is exactly how the people of Kasturba Nagar, a small area in the city of Nagpur, have been living for the past 15 years. Most of the people that lived in this area were construction workers, auto rickshaw drivers, house helpers, people with minimum wage jobs. One of the points of significance that a lot of activists seem to point out is the fact that they all belonged, well, most of them belonged to the Dalit community. Most of the people in the basti were just simply surviving. An average person in this basti had to earn their meals on a daily basis. Sometimes they couldn't even afford to pay for food. One of the residents recalls they had to stay hungry. They had to starve for 3 days straight as a child because their family just couldn't afford meals. Now, the residents didn't just have hunger or poverty to deal with. No, crime in this neighborhood was pretty prevalent as well. Petty crime was something that the residents dealt with on a daily basis. But they were not prepared, nor were they ready to deal with the kind of crimes that could only be committed by years and years of neglect and turning a blind eye by the authorities to a very powerful man. Where time and time again complaints meant nothing and the goon could just simply crawl back into society as if nothing had happened. And it seemed like every time he was released, he ended up committing something even more bold, even more brutal, as if he was sending a message, as if he knew that nothing could be done about him. These poor people have been terrorized and victimized by a man so devoid of humanity that even a black hole would have seemed brighter in his presence. This is a story of a group of people who, after being victimized, abused, and ridiculed for so many years, came together to finally defeat the depravity of Akku Yadav. Bharat Kalicharan Yadav, also known as Akku Yadav, was born in 1972 to a milkman. We don't know his exact date of birth, it's not available. His childhood was as normal as it could have been for anyone in that area. He would hang out with his friends, he would swim with them, he would graze his cattle. His family had some milk business. I also got a sense from the documentary that his family was also one of the more well off families in the area, in the sense that they were not struggling for food like everyone else was. They had a good business all the family would participate in. He was also Brahmin in this predominantly Dalit neighborhood. One among six brothers and six sisters, he seemed to have been fairly influenced by his older brothers. It seemed like after the death of their father, everything kind of changed. The dynamics in the family changed quite a bit because the siblings did not have anyone to rely on. But none of the brothers tried to earn any money through fair means though. Akku's older brother had already ventured into crime here and there a little bit, and so Akku followed. The people of the Basti talk about Akku as if he was inevitable. You know, the feeling of an impending doom, where the air itself feels heavy, tense. That's how his presence was like. Even if he wasn't around, people could always feel him, as if he was always about to appear. Akko himself have said to have been an extremely paranoid individual. He wouldn't let gatherings happen for the fear of them plotting against him. Not even little boys were allowed to play outside in groups. That was the extent of his paranoia. But the paranoia itself did not stop him from committing his crimes though, did it? His crimes included extortion, theft, criminal intimidation, house breakings, you name it, and this man had done it all. It all began in 1991 when Akku, a known petty criminal at this point, along with his gang members, came across a couple. Initially, the group plan was to just rob them and that's it. They didn't want to go any further than that. But Akku's plans changed midway. He was slowly cornering the girl while his group members were trying to extort this young couple. In the commotion of it all, the couple escaped and a gang rape case was registered against the whole group. In all the research I've done about this case, be it the documentary, the books that I've read, or even numerous articles that I've read about this case, they always talk about this gang rape case as a fleeting moment. They never go into details. There's always just one line about this case that it had happened, only for I think the reader to understand that in 15 to 20 long years of his criminal activity, this was the only case of sexual assault that was registered against him. An FIR was registered. I don't think he served any time for it. Him and his gang members just walked free. No significant consequences for an extremely violent and sexually charged crime. This was the beginning of a very long list of crimes and years of terror that this man would put this community through. Fear now had a face, and it was his. Meena is one of the local women who makes a living through modest means like owning a grocery store. She, along with her husband, works so hard every day to provide for their family, to make ends meet so that they could give the best possible life that they can to their children. And whenever she sees Akku, she knows that she's not going to have the best day. This is like the cruelest part of this case, is that terror, panic, anxiety was such a constant. They were living in a fight or flight mode for 15 years. Akku would often come to her shop and buy things and not pay for them, or pay very little. Or when confronted about it, he would either beat them or threaten them, or sometimes both. There's this very heartbreaking moment in the documentary where she talks about this one incident where Akku had come over at her house. Meena remembers that she had a watch that she had kept on the table right in sight of Akku. And after he was gone, the watch was nowhere to be seen. So, as a normal human being with common sense, the next day she decided to confront him about this. But instead of resolving this issue, maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe, which it could hardly be a misunderstanding because of the reputation you carry, my man. You cannot blame her for accusing you of something which is in line of what you do. That is your profession at this point. He started to beat Meena's husband in front of her. And she was also terrified in the moment because he was enraged. At this point, Meena just decided to give up and she just told him to calm down. She did first aid for his wound and never spoke about this ever again to him. And she knew from this point on, she needs to avoid him and to not cause trouble in her own life. Meena was one among the many residents who were at the receiving end of his threats and intimidation. And most of them gave in because they all had families with them and they didn't want their families getting hurt. But not everyone in the basti stayed silent though. There was one woman who looked him straight in the eye and told him to F off. And that woman was Asha Bhagat. And you have to understand how rare it was for anybody to confront him in the basti because, first of all, he was always surrounded by his goons, so he was very well protected. And second of all, they knew that when they're dealing with this guy, they have to throw away logic and personal space out of the window because the only language this guy knew of was of weapons and violence. And she would not just speak for herself, but she would also confront him when he was harassing and threatening other people. In the late 1990s, Akku was attacked by a group of people. He barely managed to escape with his life, and he probably would have not survived if it weren't for his best friend, Avinash Tiwari, who donated him his blood and saved his life. And you must ask, how would Akku treat not just his best friend, but a person that saved his life by taking away from his friend what was given to him? His life. In 1997, Avinash and Akku were just hanging out at a local store with their friends. And a conversation happened. The conversation was apparently about Avinash's closeness with Asha Bhagat, who was at this point Akku's number one enemy. The conversation turned into an argument and then a heated argument. And in the heat of the moment, Akut just got up and left. And for a moment, everybody were like, maybe this was just a little argument that happened between friends from once in a while, and it'll get resolved eventually over time and they will talk it out. But that was not it. Akut came back, and he did not come alone. He came back with a knife. He opened the knife with his teeth and stabbed Avinash to death. He murdered his best friend in broad daylight, publicly, and so brutally. And listen, stabbing someone to death is not an easy thing. It's not some heat of the moment thing that just happens to you. It takes a very conscious effort, it takes force and intention. You literally have to push through muscle and bone, and you have to keep doing it again and again and again until you squeeze the life out of someone. And this wasn't just someone, this was his best friend. I can't wrap my head around it. How can you look someone in the eye, someone who gave you a second chance at life, and drive a knife through their heart? I don't know. And for the murder of Avinash Tiwari, he served a very long, extended, prolonged sentence of 10 months. I think the justice system was unnecessarily harsh towards him. I mean, it's not like he's taken someone's life or anything. I personally think they should have cut him some slack. For anybody who doesn't understand that it was sarcasm, thank you. Maybe it's our fault for thinking that people can't get away with murder because apparently they very well can. In 1999, something unusual happened. Akku walked into Meena's shop in the dead end of the night, picked up a few things, and actually paid for them. And as we've established this before, he rarely pays for anything. From there, he made his way to Asha Bhagat's house. And Asha Bhagat was not a fool. She was cautious. She knew better than to open her door to any random stranger in the night. But this night, Akku was crafty. There was no world in which Asha Bhagat would have opened her doors for Akku Yadav. And he knew that. So he made one of his men pretend to be Asha Bhagat's son's friend. It was a simple trick and it worked. The latch clicks, the door opens. Akku is waiting in the shadows with a weapon in his hand. As the door opened, he dragged her outside. Asha Bhagat's daughter saw everything unfold. She begged and pleaded with them to stop, but they wouldn't. Akku Yadav slit her throat and beheaded her. And even in this moment, he couldn't let his greed go. She had some jewelry on her. To remove that jewelry, he chopped her ears and nose, mutilated her breast, and disfigured her. This was not just a murder for him, this was a presentation of his rage for anybody that stands against him. No woman, no family, no soul would be spared if they spoke up against him. For the murder of Asha Bhagat, he served 16 months in prison. Again, I don't understand the concept of giving prison sentences in months for a crime this serious. The next murder he commits, he's gonna be considered a serial killer. Like, factually. What are you gonna do then? Give him 20 months? The math doesn't add up, the justice doesn't add up. Nothing about this makes sense to me. If you actually look at his pattern, there is a crystal clear escalation. First, it was theft, then intimidation, extortion, then housebreakings, then finally murder, and then murder with mutilation. What does this man have to do more for the authorities to put him behind bars for good? Why is he just walking free in the middle of the people that he constantly victimizes? How are the authorities not alarmed by his escalating actions? How did nobody connect the dots and predicted what would happen next? Asha Bhagat's death had a lasting impact on the community, especially the women, because she was the one constantly fighting for the women, protecting them even more than the police. With her gone, I'm sure they felt more vulnerable to his violence than before. They were not fearful for nothing though. When he came back after serving his very long 16-month prison sentence for murder, might I add, they noticed he was even more cruel and bold with his crimes this time. And this time, he was targeting women. The following victim testimonies have been provided anonymously. With the exception of the activists, all victim names are pseudonyms. Thankfully, none of the real names have been made public. So picture this. It's 4:30 in the morning and it's dead quiet outside like it usually is in the night. And suddenly, Radha hears a knock on the door. Her husband wakes up, annoyed, obviously, because why would anyone come in the middle of the night at anybody's house? The husband calls out, asking who is it. But there was silence from the other side. There was 10 whole minutes of just silence. The husband calls out again, and finally, a voice from the other side. It was calm. The husband and wife realize that it was Akku. The husband opens the door, but he is cautious. There he sees Akku standing right in front of him. But Akku is not even paying attention or even looking at the husband. His eyes are glued on Radha. And then he says it. He says he wants to talk to Radha alone. Her husband's like, there's no way that's happening. You're not talking to my wife without my presence. And in this moment, Akku's voice drops. He won't say another word unless he's alone with Radha. Her husband is still persistent and straight up refuses again. And that's when everything flips because Akku does not handle rejection well. In one move, he drags the husband outside and shoves him into the toilet and locks the door. And now he's finally alone with Radha. He whips out weapons, shiny, sharp, and threatening, and tells her to come with him. Again, Radha refuses. Think about it. It's the middle of the night. Her husband's locked away and she's staring down a violent man with weapons. She still said no. It was a clear no. He grabbed her and dragged her outside on the streets. Here's the part that gives me chills. Windows start opening one by one. The whole basti is now watching. Dozens of people staring and nobody moved. And listen, I get it. They were scared. Akku was dangerous. They didn't want to be next. Just imagine being Radha. You're dragged away onto the street in the middle of the night, your husband shoved in some dark room, and this is all happening with hundreds of people in attendance as a witness, and nobody moved a single bone in their body. Akut assaults her multiple times in the span of a few hours. After he was done, he proposes marriage to Radha. The audacity, the absolute delusion of this man. Who does he think he is? And she again refuses, like she's done a number of times before. I think at this point she's refused him in every font, every remix, every language that he can understand, and it still doesn't get it through his head. It's like he's never heard the word no in his life ever before, and the moment he did, his brain just turned into a mush and he can't process it. Radha's life changed forever. Her own parents cut her off. Society stamped her with the damaged label as if she was the problem. That right there is Akku's most deadliest weapon. Not the knife, not the threats, the shame. He knew exactly how this would play out. Women wouldn't speak, not because they didn't want to, but because society would punish them harder than it ever punished him. And he was right. One woman from the Basti said that she stopped sending her daughters to school altogether. Why? Because she was scared of Akku and his men harassing their daughters or even worse. She was not alone in this decision. Tons of families in the Basti did the same for their own daughters. Instead of educating their daughters, they locked them up inside their homes until they could get them married. Imagine feeling so unsafe in your own community that school feels like a death sentence. If you ask me, that is the heart of this case. Being a victim of SA back then was treated as fate worse than death. I don't think much has changed since then. I don't think we've made much progress in that department. Victims of SA still have a very hard time coming forward, telling their story, and getting justice at the same time without being shamed, ridiculed, victim blamed for their choices. Shame is an invisible weapon. It does not leave any trace behind. There's no evidence, there's no fingerprints, but it destroys lives all the same. And it cannot be traced back to you. And Akku, he knew it. As long as women carried the blame, he could do whatever he wanted. In another incident, Akku knocked on a door pretending to be the police. Classic move. Inside the house, there was a mother and her pregnant daughter trying to find safety. Instead, they found Akku at their door. Well, he found them. As soon as the mother opened the door, Akku struck. He dragged the woman outside. The mother did everything. She begged, screamed, and cried for anyone to come and rescue them. Anything you would expect a mother to do. Windows started opening again. People watched. No one moved. Silence was louder than the screams. She was 7 months pregnant at the time. She had come to her maternal house that was in Kasturba Nagar to give birth because she felt like this was a safe place for her to be in this very fragile time of her life. She was assaulted by not one, not two, not even three, but 7 men that night. The mother got her to the hospital the next day, desperate and frightened, trying to make sense of this nightmare. The mother reached out to a local activist, Bhaganbhai Meshram, and Bhaganbhai did try to help them in a real way. She went with them to the police station to file an official complaint. She encouraged them and supported them, was willing to stand by them till the very end. But when the moment arrived, when they had to actually file the police complaint, in the police station, the mother got cold feet. She didn't want to risk it. There was just too much to lose, and Akku had already promised to come back. In Kasturba Nagar, promises from him weren't just empty threats. He said it plainly. If anyone tried to complain against him for anything, he would kill their entire family, chop them into pieces. Those were his exact words. Knowing what we know of Akku and everything that the residents have seen from him, they didn't doubt what he was capable of for even a second. Akku had allegedly raped over 40 women in Kasturba Nagar, his youngest victim being only 10 years old. Residents claim that there was Akku's victim in every other house in Kasturba Nagar. While all of this is going on, you must be wondering, where is the police? What is the police doing in all this? Is nobody reporting any crime? Akku basically had the police in his back pocket, like his little minions, his little puppets. He would bribe them with alcohol and little money, and that's all it needed to bring the police to his side. First of all, because of the stigma surrounding sexual assault, most of the women would just not file a complaint. And a few that did, this is how the police treated them. Remember Radha? She and her husband did go to the police station to file a complaint. Side note, Radha was also one of the first few victims of Akku's sexual crimes after he'd been back from prison. And when they finally did, their brilliant response and their swift action was to question the husband. Question what, you might ask? Question about his wife's affairs, of course. The police, I kid you not, accused Radha of having an affair with Akku. They didn't even take her for a medical exam, followed none of the protocols that was necessary in this situation, in this very delicate situation. What do you even do after that? Who do you complain to? Because this is how the police are treating the victim. Word goes around in Kasturba Nagar. People talk. The way they treated Radha would also set a precedent for how they would treat Akku's other victims of SA. Radha, after being victimized by the police, again just decided to remain silent this time. Why would a victim go through the hassle and the humiliation of reporting a crime when this is how she's being treated? In one or the other instance, the residents claimed that when one victim had gone to the police to file a complaint of SA against Akku, the police essayed her in return. Are you serious? Are you for real right now? I cannot even make this shit up. Even if I program my brain to come up with the most evil shit, I still can't come up with this. Any woman that built up the courage to complain against this guy, to come out in the open despite of all the social stigma around it and how she would be perceived by everyone. Mind you, in small towns like these, a woman's chastity is highly valued. She would be completely blacklisted from the society after the complaint. And the police would just constantly badger them, question their stories, slut shame them, call them loose women. I don't even know what that means. Even after all that, they wouldn't even do anything about the complaint. Then why would the victims go through all that trouble, take a huge risk for what? Just to get verbally abused? One of the police officers was anonymously quoted saying, possibly one or two women might have been essayed by Akku, some more might have been molested, and some might have made their compromises to keep Akku happy, but right now all of these cases have been clubbed together as numerous cases of SA, and that is completely not true. End quote. So you do agree that there were at least one or two cases that were legitimate and you guys did not follow through with the cases and were lenient on him. Tell me, uncle living in 1800, what does make their compromises to keep him happy mean? What does your thick head understand by that statement? Because I'm hearing a lot of words, but I'm not hearing mutual consent anywhere. I'm sure these boomer police officers had no clue what consent means. I don't think they understand that coercion, manipulation, persuasion can also lead to sexual assault. I think the only definition of sexual assault in their head is sexual assault with a gun to your head. And again, remember Radha? She was threatened with weapons, and the police still didn't take her seriously. So I guess I don't even know what the definition of sexual assault is. You cannot convince me that misogyny doesn't play a part in all of this. Now, let me introduce you to Usha Narayan. She was smart, confident, and super hardworking. Her morning started at college. By evening, she was hustling at a hotel job. Here's the thing, while many in the Basti could be easily intimidated, Usha wasn't one of them. She knew her rights, she was just not someone that you could mess with. Since her childhood, she wanted a better life, not just for herself, but also for her family. She wanted to pull them out of poverty. And the ultimate goal was to move out of the Basti. It wasn't just a random fantasy. Her dad was a college graduate. Her dad pushed all of his kids towards education. Guess what? All of them graduated from colleges and ended up being one of the very few families that had that level of education. She had a job at this hotel as a staff, so naturally she had a uniform to adhere to, which was a very professional pencil skirt and a shirt along with a vest, I believe. She would even avoid wearing that uniform while she was coming back from her shift because she was worried that she would be harassed by Akku and his buddies. Even after all these attempts to avoid being in his line of sight, he still managed to harass her. One day, one of her colleagues was dropping her home. Simply, it was just too late. They passed Akku and his friends. They immediately started harassing them. He would make these very derogatory comments like, "People say you take it from both sides. And of course, you must be tired after providing such a good service." He passed these comments in front of her colleague that she barely knew. She felt so embarrassed in the moment, but she would mostly just try to avoid him and not engage with him in any way because her goal was to just earn enough money to get out of there. She didn't want any trouble. But how long can you go about your day ignoring someone's blatant disregard for basic human decency? And Usha wasn't someone who could just sit still and not do anything. Even though she probably knew that staying quiet and sticking to her plan was a smart move, but when she saw her neighbor Ratna getting harassed by Akku and his men in the middle of the night, demanding money from her, they even smashed her furniture and again threatened to kill her family, Usha had to say something. She strongly urged her neighbor to file a police complaint. The neighbor and Usha went to file the police complaint together. It's speculated that the police tipped off Akku about the complaint. This was it for her, and this was Akku's last straw. Now his fury awaits Usha. Akku and his men had very brazenly surrounded Usha's home. It was not just Usha who lived in this house, she lived with her parents and her brother and his wife. Akku was furious. He was quoted saying, "Let me see who has the balls to save Usha now. Come out," he yelled. And to say that there was no tension inside the house would be an understatement. She and her family were terrified as Akku hurled insults and threats against them. He also brought acid with him, which is again a very specific weapon that's been historically used only against women. "You were very proud of your beauty, right? Now flaunt your beauty after this," he yelled. And there's this idea of in his head, because she would not just wear Indian clothes, she would also wear Western clothes and she would not conform to his idea of femininity. He thought that by taking away her beauty, he could strip her of her power, humiliate her because she wouldn't have her beauty anymore, which is true. Beauty is something that is essential to women, that is essential to any human being. You feel good when you look good. Beauty is not the only thing Asha possessed though, because she was also smart, and Akku couldn't understand that because he had neither. There's also this certain sentiment of ego, like, oh, she thinks she's all that, huh? Let me humble you real quick. He couldn't fathom the fact that a smart, beautiful woman just wouldn't take his shit. He has to put her in her place. She has to be shown that things can be taken away from her if she doesn't behave. Usha, frantic, tried to use the landline to contact the police, but the phone line from her house was already disconnected by this group of people that had surrounded her house. All while Akku continued his threats outside her house. He threatened to parade her naked on the streets in front of her family, gang rape her, and then cut her into pieces. I can't imagine what her or her family must have been going through in that moment. To hear someone talk so horribly about your sister, your daughter, and the threat of it being so real. Usha and her family were trying to do everything in their power to have some sort of communication with the authorities, but every plan came to a dead end. Realizing that there is nothing much that can be done, Usha turned to her family one last time and told them to hide in a room which was at the back of the house. They simply refused. Of course they would. did. They were not gonna let her deal with this alone, but Usha wasn't backing down either. She knew how high the stakes were and she knew how real the situation was. If she was gonna die, she wasn't letting her family die with her, nor was she gonna go down with silence and by giving him the satisfaction he wants. She forced her brother to take his wife and their mother to the room which was at the back of the house. She looked around anxiously, trying to come up with some sort of plan. Anything, something. And she did. A gas cylinder, which was in the kitchen, caught her eye. She immediately, without wasting any time, unplugged the gas cylinder and dragged it in front of the main door of the house and screamed with all the strength that she had left. I have turned on the gas. If you barge into my house, I will strike a match. My house will burn down and I will take you all down along with me. She was like, I'm gonna die anyways. You've made that pretty clear to me. So if I'm gonna go down, I'm going down with you. This was the singular turning point in the Basti for everyone. It was the first time that someone had not given in to their fate of Akku's wrath. Someone had finally pushed back. It took a woman to look in the face of death and show it a middle finger, honestly. She was not gonna die at his crusty, dirty hands. She made sure of it. And because someone had finally stood up to him, the Basti people who have been witnesses to his crime since many years finally started coming out of their houses. We have talked about so many cases in this episode itself where the residents just watched while he committed his crimes in broad daylight, in the middle of the night, anywhere, anytime, with anybody. They did not have the courage to stand up to him, but now they did. It almost felt like the courage spread as if it were contagious. There was no looking back for the residents now. They came out of their houses to defend Usha with whatever they had. Sticks, pots, utensils, anything. They just showed up. Akku and his men were obviously outnumbered by the people, so they ran with tails between their legs. The moment he had to fight a fight of equals, he ran away. Just a pathetic man through and through. Now that the residents knew that they could do something about this problem that plagued their neighborhood for so many years now, they came together and Usha encouraged everyone to speak up. Akku went into hiding, obviously. The residents kept complaining to the police in the hopes that they would arrest him, but as we've already discussed, the police were as good as inanimate objects in this case. They didn't do anything. They didn't move, they didn't budge, they just stayed stationary like an inanimate object. Chandra, a local activist, suggested to hold a press conference. On 4th August 2004, a press conference was held where they spoke about everything from the extortion to the many women he had assaulted. But all these attempts were futile as neither the police nor the press helped them in any way. I think with the press, they were hoping that the press would help them reach their case to non-local areas so that at least the publicity might force the police to do something about this. Like truly, the locals in this case were trying to do everything in their power to do something about this case, to get some sort of help from the legal system. They even filed a joint complaint where some 80 members of the Basti had signed the document, and still crickets from the law enforcement. At this point, they were doing the work of the police, getting witnesses, going as far as searching for Akku themselves so they could direct the police towards him. They were desperate. They didn't want him roaming freely around the Basti and terrorizing everyone ever again. On 6th August 2004, a mob broke down Akku's home. I think this was also done in the hopes that he would just not come back. The next day, on 7th August, Akku surrendered himself to the police. Allegedly, he did that to get police protection because he knew that he would be safe in police custody than outside. Even with so much tension rising in the Basti, Akku had to go and surrender himself. The police just couldn't arrest him themselves. I think they think that's not part of their job. He had hoped to stay in police custody until things had cooled down a little bit outside. The locals were partially relieved, but then they see in the newspaper that Akku's bail hearing has been set for 13th August. That's when they collectively lost it because, of course, he's gonna get bail. He always gets bail. There was no doubt in the residents' mind that he's gonna come back and make everyone's life hell. So they did not want him back at any cost. They were willing to do anything to keep him out of the Basti this time. On the morning of 13th August 2004, some 100 to 150 women got ready in the morning. They left their houses carrying chili powder, kitchen knives, or any sort of weapon that they could get their hands on. It was almost like an unsaid thing between them. They knew what they were doing and they knew what had to be done. And this got me kind of thinking, is that the grim reality of our world at its primal level? It's kill or be killed. That's the only choice the women of Kasturba Nagar felt like they had. They knew that if this man got out of jail, it would be the end for them. So the women made their choice. They marched down to the courtroom where Akku was to be presented for his bail hearing. They were waiting for him at the courthouse when Akku finally arrived with 3 police constables escorting him to the courthouse. As he was going inside, he saw one of the women that he had assaulted in the crowd. What does he do? He calls her a prostitute. I think victims of sexual assault react to their abuse in different ways and also to their abusers. For some, it's just denial. Some might try to avoid them. Some might never try to see their face ever again in their lives. And for some, it can be rage. The victim in this situation, she just started to beat the shit out of him in front of this courtroom. She was also quoted saying, "Only one of us can live right now. It's either gonna be you or it's gonna be me." The crowd of women had begun to surround him from all sides. The police took notice of the situation. They realized that things can get worse from this point on. So they rushed him inside and they closed the main iron channel gates of the courthouse. They took him to a small room which was called District Court number 7. It was a small room that was mostly used for documentation purposes. The police had taken him there in the hopes of protecting him because the crowd was getting large. But the room had 3 doors and one of the doors was broken into by the mob and the crowd just started to rush in towards Akku and the police constables. The police and the staff present in this room flew the area because they didn't want to be collateral damage. The women took turns beating and stabbing him to death. He was stabbed around 70 times. The residents claimed that all the women present there wanted to stab him at least once. There was also a rumor that his private parts were also cut off, but it's not been confirmed by anyone. On 13th August 2004, Akku Yadav finally died at the hands of the many women he had victimized. After the murder at around 2:45 to 3 p.m., an FIR was registered by the head constable that was present at the crime scene when everything went down. He was one of the 3 constables that was escorting Akku to his bail hearing, and so the investigation began. And there's another whole side of this case related to how the police handled the investigation. It was a shit show, to put it plainly. The way the police were conducting themselves, it felt like they were running a circus instead of an investigation at this point. So there are basically 2 perspectives about this case. One is of the residents' perspective and the other is the police perspective. Let's start with the police's perspective because I just want to get done with it. So according to the police, the murder of Akku was not the result of him being a serial rapist or them failing to do their jobs. It was simply a result of a gang rivalry. They believed that some of Akku's rival gang members had convinced these women to commit such a violent crime and take the blame for it as well. The other perspective is of the residents, which we have covered extensively in this episode, basically saying that he was a serial rapist, extremely violent towards women and pretty much everybody. The police arrested 5 women related to this case. They were immediately released on bail the next day, as the prosecutor admitted that he did not have any direct physical evidence linking these 5 women to the case. The police also arrested 10 men. They were trying very hard. They were fighting tooth and nail to prove this gang rivalry nonsense theory. And listen, do I think there were no men involved? Of course, there were men involved, but the mob mostly consisted of women. Maybe there were some men that belonged to Akku's rival gang. Maybe they saw this as their chance at revenge. But you cannot dismiss so many victims' claims of SA just because it makes you look bad. And if it was actually predominantly the result of gang violence, why was Akku the only one targeted? Why weren't his other gang members attacked? Why didn't Akku's gang attack the other gang? How could so many women collectively decide to take the blame for something that they did not do? Something that was not in their interest? Why did it happen publicly, especially in the courtroom? The police couldn't answer any of these questions. The police just simply couldn't accept the fact that so many women were being sexually assaulted and they finally had had enough of this savagery. The police tried everything to discredit the victims' stories because they knew what would be the consequences of accepting such claims. They would be at the center of this case. Everybody would turn to the police and start asking very simple and valid questions. How did so many women felt the need to do this? What did you do to stop his terror? Obviously, the police wouldn't have any answers to these questions. All in all, 22 people were arrested and tried, including men and women. The trial began on February 10th, 2012. The verdict was given on 10th November 2014. All 22 were found not guilty for the murder of Akku Yadav. According to the defense lawyer, Advocate R.K. Tiwari, he was quoted saying, "Examination of the 4 eyewitnesses by the public prosecutor cannot be relied on for various reasons, which is why all the accused in this case have been found not guilty. End quote. The judge presiding over this case had given a statement to the media. I don't think judges usually talk to the press, but in this case he did. He was quoted saying, "You reap what you sow." End quote. So when Judge Suryavanshi was giving his acquittal verdict, he pretty much blamed the police for being hand in glove with Akku, which basically confirms everything that the residents have been saying about the police. So the judge also noted that in Akku's post-mortem report, he had alcohol in his viscera. How did he have alcohol in his system if the police weren't slipping it to him? I want to end this episode by giving voices to his victims. One woman from the Basti said, "No one gave us justice. We fought and took justice in our own way. In this fight for justice, our bodies transformed into lawyers, magistrates, and judges, all within ourselves, so we took care of ourselves." End quote. Meena said, "Sorrows are just like knots that remain tangled forever. We can never forget them. We can forget happy memories, but sad ones leave scars. And Akku is one sad scar." End quote. And that is the end of this video. Thank you for listening to me. I hope this video was informative. I try to keep it as short as possible, but there was just so much information about this case. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for similar content. Comment down below what you think about this case. Let me know if you want me to cover any other case. Until then, please be happy, please be safe, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. Bye.